What you look at is two of my cars, Jim Johnson's 415 cubic inch small block Chevy on methanol and injected with Lenco, and Irwin in a small block Ford Blue Thunder dual dominator 440 cubic inch. Both of them are NA. That's what I like, both team cars, Ford and Chevy. And of course, we always run together at the pits and take on the other competition. Problem with heavy maintenance engines.
Yeah, it's a foot inside. What size are those fucking nuts? I got a 3/8 in them.
This fire right there. Showing part.
It's
Is all the set for this weekend. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's 8. Hey, I had a lot of questions about that 500 horsepower 351 WINDSOR, basically mild build. And remember when previous tech videos I had where I stated that pump gas, which this is going to run on with 11.5 to 1, 200 psi is maximum, and this one pumped at 148 with the analog Mac Tools compression gauge, and then the computerized one read about 140. So we'll just take the analog number 148. Let's round off to 150. And somebody stated, hey, that's kind of low. Well, I did say, yes, I was surprised. But, dummy me, I realized that I'm in Las Vegas, and I look at the density altitude just in this area for today is about 2,800 feet, a little short of 3,000. So that means if this pumped at 148, and if this was in LA at a sea level location, which we should base all our builds on, timing, ignition, everything, it would have read about 20-25 pounds more. So it'll probably sit around 170, 175. Still good, all right? But you can tell that you're creeping up slowly. The cam is not that big. It's big, but not that big. The lift is about, in the 580 plus on the exhaust. It's quite high, and I think the intake is somewhat. I'll post it right here. And with a 1.7 rocker, it did go up. The duration didn't change much, but the cam lift did go up about 35 thousandths between a 1.6 and a 1.7 rocker. On the distributor spring, I'm gonna give the rundown before we wrap this video up. I have one yellow and one silver spring on this thing. The reason for that, if I have two yellow springs or two silver springs, when it starts to RPM, okay, both of them would start to vibrate or start to shake at about the same RPM, because they're basically the same weight, same spring rate. So what you want to do is make one a little stiffer and the other one a little lighter, whichever way you go. All right, one yellow, one silver. Try to avoid 2 yellows or 2 silver. The reasoning for that is so that when you're looking at your timing marks, it's not bouncing up and down, because both of the springs are of the same resonance, and they would bounce the timing mark. If one is different, a little stiffer, or one's a little lighter, they tend to cancel each other's out, or each other's vibration. All right, so that's one thing we need to take note of. Also, like for any good engine rebuild, the more initial timing you put in, the more responsive that engine is going to be. For example, if you have a total of, let's say this thing here, about 36 degrees, 34, maximum total timing, where it likes, the cylinder head likes it. You know, the Ford is usually 34, the Chevy, comparable build, about 36. Now, what's going to happen, small block that is, what's going to happen there is that when you have this issue at hand, where you have not as much initial timing, the car is going to leave a little softer, okay, because you're not working the engine as good as it can. And when you put a lot of initial timing, as long as you don't stumble out of the gate by having too much, the response is so much better. So you put 14 degrees and then a total of 34, let's say at 2,500 RPM. Feel the response off the line or off the corner, as opposed to, let's say, 6 degrees and then a total of 34. You'll notice this thing is gonna, it's not gonna be as responsive. As you can tell, this is very responsive. That's the way I want my engines. You could have more power than me, for example, but if my engine responds, it gives I see a lot of engines that are down on power but have great off corner or off the line leave because of almost instantaneous and responsive engine, and they end up winning the race. I remember I was racing some big block car back in street racing days. He had more horsepower than me, but I tell you what, I put a car and a half on him every doggone time. He's always trying to chase me, and I was nipping by a fender at the finish of the quarter mile, right there by Balboa Park. I think that's the name of the place in Van Nuys. So it's amazing how, I bet you if he ramped up his ignition timing, his initial, he probably would leave as good as, or right there beside me. But it didn't happen because I think it was probably set up on the factory specs. So remember that, guys, put as much ignition timing as you can and then limit the total. And like this one here, it's got no second ring. Okay, so if you do run a second ring, just make sure it's wider. For the longest time, people say, set the top ring gap at 18 and then set the second ring gap at 14 or 16. There's too much trap pressure between the top and second ring, and it tends to flutter the high RPM. So you want to get that ring gap to be wide. Okay, remember the second ring is not a compression ring, it's an oil control ring. People forget that. All right, they go, I'm going to lose compression if I took off or I took off my second ring or I widened the gap. I'm not going to catch all that pressure. I go, no, it's not a compression ring. It's an oil control ring. It helps the oil ring to do its job. Now that's it. When you loosen up that second ring gap, let's say you're 18 on top or 21 on top, and then you're 24 on the second ring, all the trapped gases, and you have some kind of pan evacuation here, it'll draw that clear to the trap pressure between top ring and second ring right here, this space here. It evacuates that and takes it to the crankcase and hopefully through the breathers. So that keeps the pressure of the top ring. Now, if you don't have a second ring, there you go. Also, that's not going to be a problem. But now the oil control ring becomes critical. This one has got a looser oil control ring. I wouldn't do that if you're on the street and you want. This will consume some kind of oil, a full throttle blast, because the oil ring is loose, so that the rotating resistance is quite less. Now, this is going to run some kind of pan one-way valve through the collector where you collect it and go from one hose here and then to the other side. So you disconnect this PCV when you're at the track. And remember, you can't run a pan evacuation system when you got a muffler. You need the mass flow with hardly any muffler right there, the collector, so that it'll draw vacuum, all right, or low pressure through the valve cover here or there and draw it to the pipe, through the header collector. And I've seen some guys put a pan evacuation system and then they're running a 8, 12-inch muffler or glass pack. It's not going to work. You think it is, but it's not. It's actually pressurizing, where sometimes you see your dipstick come up. That's an indication that the pressure is building up. So, guys, disconnect the PCB at the track, hook up your pan evacuation, and drop the muffler. Then you got something going. Now here, another tip I've seen many times. Guys go, well, you know, we put a vacuum pump on our engine, we didn't see nothing. It was a waste of time. Well, it is a waste of time because you didn't prepare the block. Remember the top ring having a wider gap, and then the oil control ring, when you loosen them up and you're creating negative pressure inside this block so you can evacuate the gases that are building up on the crankcase. What you gotta do, and I showed it before a previous video how I kind of like close up the oil control ring tension. Okay, there's not much. Remember, these guys are race engines and stuff. You're not looking at 100,000 miles and take a quart of oil. Not really. You know, it's going to consume something. All right? It's just part of the game when you're trying to get as much. You get nothing for free, like I always said. There's always going to be a payback somewhere down the line. When you run a vacuum pump, you definitely got to open up your second ring if you run it. If you don't have a second ring, or if you do, the top of the oil ring, there's 2 rails there. The top oil ring has to be opened up as well to facilitate the vacuum condition in the crankcase to pull it through the second ring wider gap and through the top rail of the oil control ring. So it'll draw it in through those little holes around the perimeter of the oil ring channel there. Okay, where the oil ring sits. There's a bunch of holes there. The stock piston's got a window, which makes it weak. But a lot of aftermarket have a bunch of holes drilled around behind the oil control ring. You have to have a wider second ring gap. I mean, a wider oil control ring gap. The top one only. Keep the second where it is. Okay, as tight as possible so you control the ring from going up to the top of the combustion chamber. What you want, but the second ring has got to be open. So you pull from the second ring, whatever gets past the top ring, you pull from the second ring just as easy with a wider gap, and then you pull through the oil control ring with a wider top rail gap on the oil control ring. So you have a continuous pull area there to get through the crankcase and blow through. Either you get a vacuum pump or a pan evacuation system plumb through your header. Okay, so when somebody tells you, well, we put a vacuum pump on, or we put our pan evacuation system, it didn't do nothing. Yeah, because you didn't know anything. Just joking, guys. We've all been through that. So you relieve the second ring, you open up the top rail gap, oil rail gap, so you facilitate the pulling issue there without introducing oil up. Now, I got questions about people say, could you run that on a turbo? Well, I'd put a second ring in a turbocharged application because any kind of combustion residue gets into the combustion chamber will wreak havoc. You could have a detonation possibility there. Blowers, supercharger, even nitrous oxide. All right, any oil that gets into the chamber will effectively lower the octane rating of the fuel that's in there, and is trapped inside the combustion chamber. It creates a lot of carbon, which would glow and create pre-ignition issues. So keep the oil control kind of tight when you got a turbocharged or supercharged engine or even nitrous oxide. I gotta watch out for that. All right. So, but NA, sure. All right. Now, if you got an effective manufacturing system and you run a single ring or no second ring, and your oil control ring is very decent, and with the help of a vacuum situation inside the block, the oil ring rail isn't really overwhelmed by oil. All right. So you're able to pull everything down and outside of the crankcase. All right. As always, I run a windage tray, and when you have a big pan, I like to run a crank scraper because some of the windage tray I had issues, especially with heavier weight oil, where they tend to stay up here, and when they stay up there, the sump gets starved of oil, and when the oil's dripping down, just like some of the wraparound windage tray, they catch all the oil and they don't quite allow it to drain down to the sump. So you gotta watch out. So I'd rather have a oil pan kick out on the passenger side with a crank scraper over a windage tray. But then that's my opinion. All right, I feel that's better because, like I said, I had issues with a road racing engine having starvation where the sump actually starves because I had it so effective with the windage tray, a scraper, and a kick out, the oil wasn't draining down to the sump. And when you take off that windage tray, well, then the oil drops down to the sump. Hopefully, the scraper and the kick out catches most of the windage and help drain that back to the sump. And of course, I did a little quick thing here, less than half an inch on the oil pump pickup to the bottom of the sump. This one here had about an inch and a half or almost 2 inches of distance. So that was playing with a bomb there. Okay, you're gonna suck in oil with air, or something like that. So make sure, and I know a lot of guys don't check that. Okay, so that's a quick check. You could do that quite easily, and if you're in the habit of doing that, you'll find out some of these pickups are a little far away or a little too close. The closest 250 for road racing, no closer than that. End play here, I got about 6 thousandths end play. Never forget that. All right, so when you have a tight converter and all that, it wants to shove the crankshaft forward. It beats up on the truss bearing, and your engine life is going to be short because you have a lot of this play, and then the connecting rod is going to start swaying fore and aft, and the rod is going to go out pretty quickly. So check that end play always. Put a dial indicator there and lean on it. You know, I've got 6.5, all right, maximum. That'll be pretty good. Some go as tight as 4.5, whatever. Just check it. All right. Now it's an added thing. This one runs an alternator on the passenger side. A lot of street guys, we run an alternator cutoff to the field circuit. You have an AC switcher, wide full throttle switch that you can get from any junkyard. Some of them, I think some of the speed shop have a switch, like a nitro switch that goes full throttle. It'll trigger it, but here, what you're going to do is when it hits full throttle, it disconnects the field circuit and the alternator will go freewheeling. And we've done that with a bunch of cars running road racing. There's another 9, 8, 10, 12 horsepower hiding in there. And don't worry about it. Full throttle for a few seconds. The engine will run on battery power, as a lot of them race cars do. They run a total loss system, no problem. And then when you back off or downshift, you're off the throttle, alternator gets juice again and it starts charging. And then when you're full throttle, it releases it. And they do that with even the new cars. They release not the alternator, but the AC compressor. Don't blow it up, okay? And just reverse that and apply that to the alternator, so you get free power. And also, last is that the rocker arm. When you switch from a 3/8 stud to a 7/16, the 7/16 is going to be thicker. And when it goes max lift, it has a tendency to pinch the 7/16 adjuster to the bottom, to the top part of the rocker arm. Right? You got to watch out. I think this is a good picture here. Okay, here we are. It is well known that rocker arms, usually the spring retainers, all that, touch that, as you can see right there. There's an obvious witness mark there, but a lot of people fail to also address is when you go from a 3/8 to a 7/16, the 7/16, and when you do that, and usually the adjuster is a lot thicker, this has got a cut down neck. What actually happens is that when you get to max lift, guess what you're looking at here? You tend to jam in there, especially if you got a lot of lift. You know, with standard type rocker arms and down gesso, when you get to the 700, 650, 700 plus, you're going to run into that issue. So take note of that, guys. It's just not looking for this interference there, but you got this issue here. In fact, some of them, when they're adjusted correct all the way, they'll bind right there and give you trouble. Gets worse with a 7/16 over a 3/8 because the shaft, the stud itself, is a lot thicker. So avoid that issue altogether and you're going to be fine. But anyway, really this doesn't cost that much money. Just you know, common sense things that you do to, you know, get as much power as you can. Just like, you know, electric water pump here, free. Okay, you're running through the crank, you know, and you're going up against a thermostat, you're deadheading into that, and this becomes a water break, the water pump. And then when you have a big pulley on that doggone thing, if this thing is turning 7,000 RPM with a big pulley, oh my gosh. And then the alternator pulley is a little, I mean the water pump pulley, or even the alternator pulley, it's turning a lot faster than 7,000 RPM, I'll tell you that. That's wasted horsepower, so you don't need those at high RPM. The water pump will cavitate and push against the thermostat, and then the water pump becomes a little water dyno in front of your engine, trying to stop it. All right. So hey, I hope guys that this one helps. You know, I really enjoy doing this kind of video because it doesn't cost that much money. Just deleting some stuff and trying to make shortcuts, and hopefully, as you can tell, and many of you said this is a very responsive engine, and it is. All right, so. So I'm just happy to share that with all of you. And anyway, guys, take care. We'll see you again next time.